Förum yfir klettafjöllin til hinnar víðlendu bresku Kólumbíu. Matthías Jochumsson hvatti Stefán G. í ritdómi andvökur til að flytja út á Vesturströndina þar sem engin klettafjöll varna víðsýnis.
Þaðan muntu sjá hvernig Guðs signaða sól gillir í vestri og allt til austurs öldu fleti hins ómælandi Kyrrahafs. Sjá, það landið hinna lifenda en ekki hinna þreyttu, týndu, dauðu.
Kyrrahafsströndin togaði í marga sem bjuggu á hinum harðbýlu sléttum. Og þegar járnbrautirnar fóru að ná allari þangað vestur, voru ýmsir sem héldu ferð sinni áfram þar til komið var út á ströndina, í hið milda loftslag sem þar ríkir.
It was a secondary movement. It was people who had settled elsewhere first and then subsequently moved to Vancouver. And many of them were second generation. They had parents who were born in Iceland, but it was the young adults that were coming here. Still, there were Icelanders, Icelandic-born Icelanders who came here. And by 1908, there was a significant enough establishment of a community that they began with a reading club called Ingólfur.
Called Ingólfur, yes.
Yes, and it was, of course, named after Ingólfur Arnarson.
Yes.
And as they established this organization, they were interested in providing help for people who were coming to establish themselves in the city, but also they were interested in keeping in touch with the political scene in Iceland and supporting Icelandic independence. They presented lectures on things like what is the fate of the Icelandic language in the West. So they were very active, certainly in the 1910s, 1920s.
Íslendingar byrjuðu að flytja á Vesturströndina í upphafi 20. aldarinnar og settust að í Vancouver, á Vancouver eyju, en einnig voru byggðir Íslendingar norður með ströndinni í Prins Rupert á Ósland og Hunter eyju.
It was a singular migration. It wasn't a group effort. It was, by the 1930s, only about 5% of the total population of Icelanders in Canada lived in British Columbia, and not just Vancouver, but in British Columbia. And in 2011, in the census statistics, 25% of the Icelanders in Canada live in British Columbia. So that's a huge change, and it's a change made on an individual basis.
It seems that many people on the prairies had a dream of moving here to nicer climate.
Yes.
And towards the sea.
Yes. Of course, you know, the harsh climate on the prairies affect a lot of people, and the older you get, the more it affects you. So certainly by the 30s and 40s, older generations were interested in moving to a better climate. And of course there was the Depression on, and farmers weren't doing that well. So there was a large movement during that period. And my grandparents came here from Manitoba in 1943. And the reason that they came here was that my grandmother had read a poem about the West Coast. And it was so inspiring to her that she insisted that the family move to the West Coast. So my grandfather went ahead and he got a job in Prince Rupert. And then after establishing a little bit of a foothold and a little bit of money, the whole family moved out to Vancouver. And my great-grandfather came with them. He was 93. And he was blind. He'd been blind for 40 years, and he had lived in Canada most of his life, at least half of his life anyway, and he died having caught pneumonia on the train only 4 days after that they arrived. But he was so happy to come to the coast because he could smell the salt sea air, and it reminded him of home.
Hjarta íslenska samfélagsins í Vancouver elliheimilið Höfn. Það stendur á gömlum merk, en áður var elliheimilið á Ashley Street sem höll í huga þeirra sem muna eftir því. Sólskinsgarðurinn við Höfn helgaður sólskinssystrum sem lengi ráku elliheimilið.
Við tileinkuðum þessum garði konunum, en við hefðum fengið arkitekt til að gera garðinn, og hann hélt að yxu engin blóm á Íslandi, svo hann setti niður grös og svartan sand. Þegar ég kom í stjórnina þá leit ég út og ég sagði að það ekki til blóm í garðinum. Svo það voru flest þessi vetrarblóm voru tekin úr, við erum ennþá að vinna að því.
Höfn ennþá íslenskt elliheimili í sjálfu sér og mjög glæsilegt sem slíkt, en vistmennirnir eru raunar flestir kínverskir. Það eru stífar reglur í Kanada að ekki megi mismuna eftir þjóðerni.
Það dálítið kaldhæðnislegt að hér allt fullt af íslenskum minningum í þessu húsi, en vistmennirnir eru flestir kínverskir.
Já, og það veit ekki einu sinni hvað Ísland er. Svo ef þú lítur á heimilið, við höfum verið að setja meira og meira íslenskt, til dæmis glugginn uppi með íslenska upplutnum og landakort. Við erum að reyna að láta fólkið fá einhverja hugmyndum hvaðan þetta allt saman kom. Stjórnin hér verður alltaf að vera íslensk. Og við gerum eins mikið af íslensku og við lifandi getum.
Robert Asgeirsson kvikmyndatökumaður og hefur lengi starfrækt íslenska skjalasafnið í Bresku Kólumbíu.
This is the Plymouth Rock picture of the Icelanders on the west coast. This is on an island in the Queen Charlotte's, and this is the group of Icelanders that came out west from the prairies in Manitoba to find a new home on the west coast.
Go west, young man, they said.
Go west, yep, and they did better. People have been giving me, or rather the Icelandic Archives of BC, the name I chose, materials that have been coming from their dressers and the bottom drawers and inside all kinds of trunks and stuff. And these are two pictures that showed up about 6 months ago.
Okay.
And this is a group of people around 1943. And they are the first congregation members of the Icelandic Lutheran Church here.
Okay.
In 1943. So we're trying to identify these people right now. There's not many that remember everybody. I can identify a few.
Allt í heiminum hverfult. Kirkjan sem íslenski lúterski söfnuðurinn byggði sér í Vancouver stendur enn. En tíma var hún undirlögð af Þjóðverjum, en nú þjónar hún aðallega kínverskum söfnuði og athafnirnar fara fram á mandarín.
You were brought up speaking Icelandic.
I was. My father came from Arngerðareyri and Ísafjörðardjúp. He was born and raised there. And my mother was born of Icelandic parents. She was born in Víðir, Manitoba. And so both of them felt that I should learn Icelandic, I guess. So that's all I spoke up until about 3 or 4 years old. And one day I was looking out the window and I saw these young boys out there. My mother, I guess, kept me close and didn't let me get out and about. Well, I couldn't speak English for starters. Anyway, so she said, when I was so enthusiastic about seeing these boys, I said, "Me vantar fara ut og play with the boys," however you say that in English or Icelandic. So she got me all dressed up and I went out. She led me by the hand and she said, "Just go over there and introduce yourself and play with them." In Icelandic, of course, you know. So I go over and I'm surrounded by these kids that are all, you know, at least a foot taller than me. And I'm pink with white blonde hair and small and short. And these guys are swarthy. They're all from Europe or something like that. You know, they all have darker complexion. Anyway, so they all gather around me, and they're kind of like poking and pushing at me and speaking in a language that I have no idea what the hell they're saying. So finally I said, "Yeah, hey, Bobby, quite hater too," you know. And they look at me and push me, and the leader guy, he comes up to me, he's looking down at me, and he's pushing me, and so I kind of stood my ground, you know. And I looked up and I said, "Yeah, hate Bobby, quite hater too." And he said, "I hate you too." Bam! And he hits me right in the nose, and I fell on my bum in the dirt. My nose started to bleed. My mom jumped up, came running over. All the kids disappeared in 4 directions, you know. And she looked at me, and the blood was really flowing, and so she held my nose, you know, and said, yeah, okay. So in we went to the house, and she stuffed 2 toilet tissues up my nose, so I had to look like a walrus, you know, with these things coming out my nose. And my dad was in the living room, Joachim. He was reading the newspaper, and he was just buried in it. He didn't want to have anything to do with all this yelling and screaming. So finally, my mom comes in with me in tow, and she said, "Joachim," and so down comes the paper, "Ja," and she says, "Kanski það tíma fyrir litla Bobby að læra ensku." And that is when I stopped learning Icelandic and started to learn English. So now ég tala alveg vitlaus íslensku með hryllulegt málfræði.
Robert er mikill sögumaður og sem kvikmyndatökumaður hefur hann ferðast víða. Sögu kann hann af segja af því þegar hann kom til Markaville og sá Stefán G. afturgenginn. Húsið var þá mjög hrörlegt og Robert var staddur í því að kvöldlagi.
I swear this is the truth. I was reloading my film magazine. I was using an Aeroflex SR, and I was reloading it, and I just got a chill in my back, and I turned, and I was encountered the ghost of Stefán G. And he was quite mad. He said, "What are you doing here?" You know, and I was put on the defensive. And he was saying that the house was not important. It was his work that was important, and that I should just forget about this nonsense, you know. And so I said, "Well, we value the house you lived in as well." I had a real argument back and forth, justifying my existence there, and I swear that is the truth. And he finally went away. He wasn't too happy with me being there.
Norma, this is an interesting building. It used to be a hospital.
That's right. It was called Chatham House Private Hospital, and it was owned and operated by a registered nurse, Alla Bardal, who originally came from Winnipeg.
And your dad used to work there?
Yes, my father was a physician and surgeon, and a colleague, Dr. Herman Martinson, and my father, Dr. Peter Guttormsson, admitted patients and also did surgery.
So this was the 40s. And the social life was pretty lively in those days.
That's right, and they loved to get together to party, maybe 2 or 3 times a year in each other's homes. And it was a lot of fun because Frank Frederickson and his wife Bee would come to these parties, and they were great entertainers. She was an accomplished pianist, and he loved to tell jokes and do a little soft shoe, play his violin. Everybody loved it.
Frank, of course, was the captain of the Winnipeg Falcons that won the Olympic title in hockey in...
That's right. They won the gold. They won the gold medal.
Sigurður Franklin Frederickson, eins og hann hét fullu nafni, var líka flugkappi og eru til ljósmyndir frá 1920 þegar hann hlektist á í flugi frá Vestmannaeyjum og neyddist til að lenda vél sinni við Þjórsá. Hann mun hafa verið annar maðurinn til að fljúga flugvél á Íslandi. Faðir Roys Thordarssonar var fiskimaður á Winnipeg-vatni en síðar flutti hann út á Vesturströndina.
He started fishing when he was 12 years old in 1912. His father died very young, and so he became a fisherman. Fishing was very hard on Lake Winnipeg, bad weather, bad conditions, poor fishing. And so when he moved out here in 1948, he thought he died and gone to heaven because fishing was so good. The conditions were fine, the work wasn't as hard, it was just all around a pleasure for him to fish. He loved fishing, it was a passion for him as well as a vocation. And he did it until a week before he died at age 78. And it was a good way for him to finish.
Mikið af Íslendingunum sem búi í Vancouver eru þangað komnir frá öðrum stöðum í Kanada. Heather Ireland dóttir Guttormssonar sem hefur komið mikið við sögu í þessum þáttum.
I had the pleasure of spending my summers at Viðmælendur home, and I went back to see my uncle Guttormsson, who was living on the property and farming the farm that his grandfather had farmed. And we walked around, and it was a lovely spring day. And I said to him, you know, I really wish your mother and father had moved to the coast. It's so beautiful, the climate is gentle and so on. And he said in his heavy Icelandic accent, well, you know, they visited there many times, but life out there was just too easy.
Kristmanson var alinn upp í Óslandbyggðinni, langt norður með ströndinni. Þar bjuggu 70 Íslendingar þegar mest var, en þetta var fjarskalega afskekkt.
It was a 40-hour trip by steamship from here.
Okay.
And you couldn't drive in because there was no highway at the northern end of it, and nobody could afford to fly, of course. So it was isolated.
And the ships landed down here?
Right here. I many times came to this dock and caught a steamship for Prince Rupert. I must have been carried on here as a baby.
Dave man eftir því þegar Japanirnir sem bjuggu þarna með öðru fólki voru fluttir burt í stríðinu og komu ekki aftur.
I had some Japanese friends in school, I guess as everyone did, and who all disappeared in 1942. So that was a shock.
They were taken away?
Shipped off to camps in the interior of British Columbia and on the prairies. So, and virtually none of them came back. And my mother used to talk about Mrs. Yamamoto, who had been put into a fishing boat, taken off the Prince Rupert and shipped away by train. And she said, it's just awful that a person like that could be treated by the Canadian government. She was very disgusted by that.
Á götunum í Vancouver sér maður greinilega hvílíkt fjölþjóðaríki Kanada Þarna lifir fólk með ólíkan uppruna og af ólíkum kynþáttum saman í sátt og samlyndi. Stefán G. átti draum sín þetta samfélag þegar hann orti kvæðið Kanada, þar sem hann lofsöng þjóðabrotin og deildi á þjóðernis ríg. Ver heimaland sérhverjar þjóðar og tungu, sagði skáldið.
Came relatively late to being an Icelander.
Well, actually, I came at birth to be an Icelander, but I came very late at realizing that I was an Icelander. And I was about 55 years old when I learned the whole story, because I was in Thordarson in Gimli with my female family, and they were all shopping, and I was browsing the books, and I found a book with a picture of Frederickson in it. And I went to the archives and found out he was my great-grandfather. And I got very excited and started doing research, and ended up getting very knowledgeable and connected with a beautiful society. I mean, I just love what I've learned since then. It's been
but you're from a very illustrious family. From Frederickson was a big man.
Well, it's quite a story. Frederickson died of cancer in 1913. My dad was born in 1918, and his mother died when he was 2 years old in the Spanish flu. His father, my grandfather Haraldur, remarried and went to Detroit to make money in the car business. So Dad was brought up by his uncle, one of the Falcon gold medal winners. Okay. So he was brought up on the porch of the Falcon player, while his other uncle was in the Attorney General's mansion. Yeah. And that's he didn't even know at that time. And then my dad died in a plane crash when I was 11, so it was just, I found out a little more about it. My dad was a photographer, and he actually, I found a picture of him in front of Frederickson's the original log house, the first log house built in Gimli. And my dad had found it and took a picture of it, but he never talked to us about it. I never knew it. I just, much later, I found that and said, wow, I got to go save that house. So I went to Gimli, and it was gone. It had been torn down in 1980, so I was very disappointed, but...
So you found your roots there?
I found my roots, yeah. And lots of wonderful Icelanders, too.
And tell me, you're a businessman, and I know you have been looking into investing in Iceland.
Yes, and my first investment has been with Valgardson up in Hofsós. It's such a beautiful area, and he's trying to recover that area, turn it in sort of a northern resort, and I'm working with him on that. But I've seen a few other opportunities, such as in aluminum, since it's so inexpensive because of the energy to produce it there, but no one's doing any extrusion or further development of it, that there's opportunities there to really start a business.
It sounds kind of good to us. Yeah. Well, you're welcome, Bob.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Íslendingar komu fyrst hingað til Point Roberts 1893. Landafræði staðarins dálítið einkennileg. Við erum í Bandaríkjunum, horfum hérna yfir til Kanada, en staðurinn á ekkert land að Bandaríkjunum. Þannig að íbúarnir þurfa að fara yfir landamæri til Kanada til að komast til síns eiginlega heimalands.
Tveir stjúpbræður komu frá Vík í Mýrdal. Helgi og Páll, báðir Thorsteinsinnir, fóru með járnbrautinni alla leið út að Vesturströndinni, bjuggu fyrst í Victoria en komu svo til Point Roberts.
So the Foster brothers, they went on the train, but decided not to get off in the dry, cold plains. Instead, they went here to this.
Yes, thank God. And so you see the beautiful area that I grew up in.
This is absolutely beautiful here.
Yes, it reminded them of Vik so much. And with the sea all around us, and they built a fishing boat. And
it seems like a very pleasant place to live in.
It is.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful place to grow up. The children had the whole farm to play.
You are all Icelandic.
Yes.
Every single one of your grandparents is Icelandic.
Yes, yes. I'm very proud of that. Very proud of that. And thankful that my grandparents stayed on the train.
Íslendingarnir á Point Roberts bjuggu við nokkra óvissu, því landið var ætlað Bandaríkjaher. Þeir sendu bænaskrár að fá yfirráð yfir landinu sem þeir höfðu rutt og ræktað. Loks var sendur þangað stjórnarerindreki sem kvað upp úr að Íslendingar væru einhverjir hagsýnustu, duglegustu og áhugaverðustu landnemar sem ég hef kynnst í Washington-fylki. 1908 voru samþykktu lög á Bandaríkjaþingi sem tryggðu eignarrétt þeirra og þeir voru afar þakklátir Roosevelt Bandaríkjaforseta.
So happy they had to go to Seattle by boat to pick up their papers. And when they came back, they had a huge big picnic. All the women made this huge picnic and they had a big party. And they also decided to give President Theodore Roosevelt a gift. So they took one of Helgi Thorsteinson's sheep, a large ram, and one of the Elsners was an expert tanner. So he made him a sheepskin rug, and it was sent to President Roosevelt.
To Teddy Roosevelt.
To Teddy Roosevelt, yes.
Við höfum farið í allnokkra kirkjugarða í þessari ferð. Hugsanlega eru það legsteinarnir sem munu varðveita síðustu íslenskuna í Vesturheimi.
There are 77 people buried here who were born in Iceland.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yes.
And your grandparents and all your family is here?
All of my family is here. All four of my grandparents. And my great-grandmother, and my mother, and father, my son, and Someday I'll be here.
So Bertha was your mom?
Yes. Yeah, and her Icelandic name was Thorbjörg. And her maiden name was Olsson. My grandfather changed his name from Olofsson to Olsson.
Okay. And she died of tuberculosis?
Yes. She was a nurse, and as far as we know, she caught it when she was taking care of patients that had it.
That was in 44. They had medicines.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
And they were just developing it for the wounded servicemen. And she said, give all the medicine to the wounded boys. I don't need it.
But you were only a child then. It must have been quite a shock.
Yes, it was. I was only 13, just at a time when a girl needs her mother the most.
Here we have your grandmother, a remarkable woman.
Yes. Her name was Sigríður Skúladóttir, and she came from Vatnsnesi, Húnavatnssýslu. She was widowed when she had 7 small children.
Okay.
She raised them by herself and had the job of keeping the lighthouse. She was the lighthouse keeper. And she was just a very small woman, very tiny.
Lighthouse keeper.
Tiny lighthouse keeper.
So the lighthouse where Joan's grandmother used to work stood over there.
The old lighthouse is gone, but she used to go down every night. She would have to go up the stairs and polish the lens, put oil in the lamp, and trim the wick off a little bit, so that it would burn all night for the ships at the sea.
She must have been a tough woman.
I think so. And she was a very small woman, apparently.
Amma litla Joan Góður.
Yes.
Point Roberts ævintýraland með eyjum úti fyrir ströndinni, miklar laxatorfur ganga þarna upp og hvalir á eftir. Ein helsta atvinnugreinin voru fiskveiðar og niðursuðuverksmiðjur þar sem laxinn var soðinn í dósir.
There's huge schools of salmon would come through here on their way to spawn up the Fraser River. And this was the ancient times. The Indians used to come here and catch fish and dry it for winter. So it's been a trail that the salmon have followed all for centuries.
This is a strange place because we are in the US, but it's totally landlocked within Canada.
Yes, it is. That was part of the Treaty of Washington back in the 1800s. They went along, they determined the border between Canada and the US on the 49th parallel, which came across the top part of Point Roberts. And they terminated it out in the water and went in a zigzag to go through the islands. So part of the islands are US, part of the islands are Canada, and the same as Point Roberts.
So whenever you want to drive out of this place, you cross a border.
We go through the border. Yes, we go to school at Point Roberts for grade kindergarten through grade 3. Then the children have to go to Blaine. So it's 4 border crossings for them every day.
There's a nice story you tell about thinking of Iceland when you were a child.
Oh, yes. I stayed a lot with my grandparents down at the old farmhouse. And in the kitchen was a picture of Iceland. And I always thought it looked like a sheep. But my grandmother said, no, that is not a sheep. That is Iceland. And she spoke of it so reverently that I thought it must be somewhere in heaven.
Vancouver Island eyja undan ströndum Kanada. Hún reyndar ekkert smáræði, heldur þriðjungurinn af stærð Íslands. Victoria syðst á eyjunni, höfuðborg British Columbia. Borgin fræg fyrir blóm og skrúðgarða og þykir afskaplega ensk. enda hún kennd við sjálfa drottninguna sem ríkti á tíma heimsveldisins.
Once the railway came to what's now Vancouver, then it meant that people could get on the train and they could come to the west coast. And then you could take a ferry and come across to Vancouver Island, which they did. And they settled in the Fernwood area. It became a kind of Icelandic town, village. Climate was mild. It was a good place. There was deep sea fishing. In many ways, this place made more sense for Icelanders to settle than in Manitoba.
Yes.
But it took so long for the railway to come here.
Bill Valgardson segir okkur frá Ben Sieverts. Hann var háttsettur í kanadíska hernum, landstjóri í norðvesturhéruðunum og líklega eini Íslendingurinn sem hefur átt alvöru Van Gogh málverk.
One of the things that's wonderful with Ben is he would talk about Sundays. And the fact that on Sundays the Icelandic community members would gather at different people's houses. And they would continue the tradition from Iceland of reading to the assembled multitude in people's living rooms. They not in a bathstoffa. They have living rooms, and so they would have music, and they would give poetry readings. Poetry was very big, as it was in Winnipeg. That was also came from Iceland, and intellectual discussion. I think the amazing thing about these people was this tremendous amount of intellectual capacity. The fact that they were very interested in ideas, and they were very interested in politics.
Á þessum fallegu myndum sjáum við Íslendinga samankomna í Blómagarði í Victoria 1955.
This is like a Garden of Eden with all its flowers.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Victoria is known for its gardens and wonderful flowers. I think it's the moderate climate. It's just an amazing place to live.
It's a great climate.
It's
well,
lovely.
Compared to the prairies, I think it is. Yes. They had a lively social life.
Yes, they did. Yeah, for such a small group in Victoria, they seemed to entertain important people. They had a literary society that invited Stefan Geir Stefansson, and he was in Victoria 3 different occasions that we know of. They had a church that they built. They were involved. They had singers and all sorts of important people traveling around and coming to Victoria as well.
So this is an area, Fernwood Road, that was populated by Icelanders.
Yes, it's in the middle of Victoria now, but at one time it was on the outskirts of Victoria. This is an area that immigrants took housing. It was a little bit rough. The slaughterhouses were nearby. There was a gravel pit, but the Icelanders took root and they've integrated into the community.
They became very quickly anglicized, the Icelanders who moved
in Victoria. It's unusual compared to the rest of the communities. In the rest of North America, they had other Icelanders to associate with, so they didn't integrate as quickly as in Victoria. I had trouble finding many of the families because they became goodmans. I actually contacted one family, as I was saying, they were Guttormsson, and they took on the name Goodman. And when I contacted the generations that were still in town, they were quite convinced that I had the wrong family. They couldn't remember any Icelandic association, and it wasn't until I brought out pictures of great-grandmother and great-grandfather that it was like, wow, this is unbelievable.
And then Goodman became Gudmundsson again.
Yes, and then they reconnected with their roots.
Yes.
Another family, I really had a hard time. There was a gentleman named Stephen Norman, and his wife was Lizzie Burns, and we couldn't find her. But, you know, it's quite a distance from Lizzie Burns to Lasarina Bjarnason.
Lasarina Bjarnason
yes.
became Lizzie Burns.
Yes, I suppose it was convenient and easier for the English neighbors to remember, but boy, it's hard going backwards and finding them when these things are forgotten. It's lost as the generations go down. They're not familiar anymore with their Icelandic roots, and that's a very sad thing. Other families, like this blue house across the way, this was the home of Sigurður Myrdal. He came from Myrdalur in the south, and so he took on the name Myrdal.
Yeah.
That was easier to follow.
Yeah.
It's easier connection.
What did Sigurður Myrdal do for a living?
Sigurður Myrdal, his son-in-law ran a bakery in the back, behind the house. They actually had a bakery and were very popular. We had a tea house that was on the gorge waterway that was very popular place to row and canoe to in the early days, and his sultana cakes were very famous there, so well known in the early days. This is another Icelandic home. It's the home of the Sieverts family. They raised 6 children in that little home. She lost her oldest son in the First World War, broke her heart. He was her most promising child, and that she was chosen as the widowed mother to lay the wreath at the cenotaph at the legislature grounds with the Prince of Wales when he came.
Okay, and that was quite an honor.
It was extreme honor, yeah, very big honor.
But she had sacrificed her son.
She had sacrificed her son. So this house is the home was built by Ólafur Jónsson, who was known as Oliver Johnson here in town. He was the first Icelander to arrive in Victoria in 1883. In this house, his son was born, Björn Ingimar Jónsson, and he went by the name of Byron or Boss Johnson, and he became the premier of the province from 1948 to 53.
He was premier of British Columbia. That's like a forsætisráðherra.
That's right.
So Byron had a cousin.
Yes, their mothers were sisters, and they both were named Byron. One was Björn Ingimar, and the other was Björn Pétur. However, they were quite different. One was liberal, right-wing, and the other was a communist, which at the time wasn't a very popular thing to be.
So they didn't get along?
Not at all, not at all.
Sá merkimaður, prófessor Richard Beck, flutti hingað til Victoria á gamarsaldri. Hann ánafnaði háskólanum húsi sínu og bókasafni og hefur síðan verið talsverð íslensk menningarstarfsemi í kringum það.
Og ég get sagt ykkur bara á þess að fara út í ferðasöguna að við flugum beint inn í nóttlausa voraldarveröld eins og Stefán orðaði það, og það alveg ógleymanlegt að eiga þessa daga hér, þessa nóttlausu daga.
Mörgum á Íslandi þótti Richard Beck vera dálítið spaugilegur. Hann var sagður hafa flutt á 1300 ræður íslensk málefni. Það var víst einhvers konar met, en svo komst hann að því að nonni, Thorsteinson, hafði flutt næstum 4000 ræður sama efni, og það mun hafa valdið Richard Beck nokkrum vonbrigðum.
Beck var þjóðræknismadur sem flutti ræður sínar að meginmáli af eldmóði, en lokaorðin með klökkri röddu. Hann talaði fjallkonuna, Jón Sigurðsson, skógrækt og landgræðslu, Eimskipafélag Íslands og jafnvel gömlu loftleiðir af fjálgleik. Stundum hvarflaði að mér að einhver leikaraskapur byggði að baki þessu öllu hjá honum. Svo var þó ekki, heldur kom þjóðrækni hans fram í væntum þykju til alls og allra sem hann taldi hafa orðið til hagsbóta fyrir Ísland. Hér var á ferðinni vestur íslensk þjóðrækni sem var mér og minni kynslóð nokkuð fjarlæg. Ef til vill vegna þess að ekki örgrannt að hún eigi sér rætur í samviskubiti út af því að hafa yfirgefið ættjörðina.
There's a story of how Christian Sievers, father of Ben Sievers, got his citizenship.
Yes, it's quite an interesting story. He and another friend of Icelandic descent were applying for their citizenship and had to swear an oath to the Queen. And the Justice of the Peace, a little bit tipsy, perhaps drunk, wasn't able to find the Bible. And he was looking through the office and it was telling them that they couldn't become citizens. And Christian, quick thinking, reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a book of poetry written in Icelandic and said, this is a Bible in Iceland, and they were allowed to declare, swear citizenship with their hand on a book of poetry in Icelandic.
To Queen Victoria.
To Queen Victoria.
After whom the city is named.
Exactly. Akkurat.
Bill Valgardson höfundur fjölmargra bóka sem margar fjalla reynslu Íslending í Vesturheimi, sagnir þeirra og sögurnar sem þeir kunna segja.
It's very easy to be a writer in the Icelandic Canadian community.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's so much support for writers. When my first book came out, people would come to the table and I would be very hesitant. And somebody, I'd say, do you want a book? And I say, oh, I'll take 7. You know, I mean, I don't know any other community except the Icelandic Canadian community where this would happen.
Yes.
I would have to be calling Ottawa to my publisher and saying, send more books overnight.
Yeah.
Overnight, send more books. And people are very, very good. And it's still true. Stefan Jónsson, the minister, when he came and I was selling this book at the park, he said, I'll take 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Well, you're a Gimli boy, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah, you know, born and raised in Gimli, went to school there, went to Lutheran church there, and part of that entire fabric. So, you know, I got a great-grandfather, Ketil Valgardson. So sort of lots of Icelandic, but like many people coming to North America, my great-grandmother married an English soldier.
Yes.
And he came to Gimli and became a fisherman, the first non-Icelandic fisherman in the town. This happens with immigration. People came to create a community that would be New Iceland. And everything would be like Iceland, and there'd be no, just Icelanders. But of course, in a country like Canada, it's impossible. Soon, you know, those sexy girls, you know, handsome boys. And pretty soon people are getting married to strange groups. And it, you know, it's integration.
Við erum komin á leiðarenda, alla leið vestur að Kyrrahafi. Þessi þáttaröð hefur fjallað innflytjendur og afkomendur þeirra. Og þegar vel að gáð, eru þeir kannski ekki svo ólíkir innflytjendum nútímans. Þeir eru eitt lag í því safni þjóðanna sem byggir Kanada og Stefán G. orti
Svo vermdu þá Kanada í kjöltunni þinni upp kólnaða frændsemd og ættjarðar minni. Ver frjálsust, ver hollviljuð hugsjónum ungu, ver heimaland sérkferrar þjóðar og tungu. Við sitjum hér Kanada í sumarstíns linning og sólvermdu grasi að álíka vinning, hver gulltafla íslensk endurminning.